Cool. So, yeah, guys, today we'll start with, understanding the first fundamental terminologies, right? I'm sharing my screen. I hope you guys can also see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So today we'll start with the, um, we'll start with the CIA. Okay, like what is CIA triad? Before that, of course, let's understand, of course, this domain, right? What we are, going to learn. Of course, it's a part of the information security, as you know. So, what is information security? So, information security is basically a practice of protecting the sensitive information and the systems that stores, process, and transmit it. Right? See, information, right? So, information will be like three different stages, right? See, suppose if you're storing it in the database, it's in rest, right? And the same information, if you're accessing it, right? Let's say if your information is stored somewhere in the DB, it is rest, right? And if someone is accessing it, right, it is in transit, correct? And when you use it, right, it is in process, correct? Let's say I'm loading this document now, right? Whatever the PPT that I have right now. Where it is running? It's running in my system memory, right? In the RAM, right? So now if I want to protect the information, first I have to know in what are the stages that I can able to see this information. So it will be in three stages, right? Rest, transit, and in use, right? In the process, right? So now I have to protect all the sensitive information, okay, which is in these three different stages by using the security best practices to protect against the unauthorized access, right? Unauthorized access, dis okay, use, disclosure, disruption, modification, and destruction of the data, right? See, what does it mean? Um, for an example, right? It's your data, right? And let's say there is another person also, right? Of course, his information is also there in the database, right? His personal information will also be there in the database, right? Of course, he'll also access the same way. Okay, you know the same way when um, different users try to access the information, their information. Of course, they're allowed to access it. But let's say that there is an attacker. Okay, there is a attacker, right? If he try to maybe access the sensitive information, okay, which is stored in the database in an unauthorized way, and what happen? What happens in this case? There is no proper security, right? It should not happen, right? When some unauthorized user is trying to access the trying to access the information, okay, they should not access it. Okay, it could be in anywhere. So we as a security people, needs to provide the security best practices to protect all the sensitive information from the, okay, all of these things, right? Unauthorized access, use, disclosure, disruption, modification, and destruction of the data, right? I should not, only users can able to access their own personal information, okay? Only they can able to modify their information and they can able to delete their information as per the privileges, whatever they have been assigned. Of course, when it is also getting transmitted, there are ways that hackers can eavesdrop this communication, right? So we need to also think of or applying the transport layer security over here. That's the reason we have nowadays HTTPS, right? When you try to access any web application, what you have? You have HTTPS, correct? And then, of course, when you are using it in your process of, in the process memory, of course, there should be a proper isolation. I mean, the other person or other process should not maybe access that information. Once you're done with the usage, also it should not store in that. It should properly destroy it, so that when someone with the physical access who is trying to maybe do some kind of memory dump and all, they should not be able to see the sensitive information which are stored in the memory. Okay, it should properly destroy it, right? This kind of a security best practices that we need to implement it. I think I mean, this is just like in a high level. Okay, what I'm just trying to give an example, right? See, we have three fundamental elements. Okay, we can call it like information security triangle, right? Um, so this is what information security, right? So we need to uh, clear all my drawing. Yeah. So we need to make sure that we provide the security for the information, right? Okay. So yeah, this is like CIA, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So if you take the previous example itself, right, you have some confidential data which is stored in the database, right? This is like very confidential or high confidential data that you have, right? It should be only accessible to the authorized user. Correct. Let's take an example of your Gmail, right? So all your emails will store in your, of course, in the database, right? That's where you're trying to access it. Correct. So what is mean by confidentiality over here is, right, ensuring that the sensitive information is only accessible by authorized people, right? So when you try to access your emails, right, by logging into the Gmail, they'll verify you who you are, right? That's what we call it as authentication, right? You have to prove yourself, with whatever the authentication mechanism that you are chosen, right? Like usually now we have username and password. And of course, multi-factor authentication is also in the place. You will have some kind of a notification kind of a thing, right? So they are verifying before granting the you know data, right? And then they are only giving the access to the right people. Okay, that's how they are maintaining the confidentiality. You understand my point, right? Suppose if I try to, as an attacker, okay, if I try to maybe make a request to your data, they should deny this request, right? You got my point, right? If in case if they are giving the access to your data, I mean there is no confidentiality, right? There is no confidentiality. But we have to make sure that, okay, when you are designing a system or an application, okay, we keep these three things in the consideration, right? We have to keep the user's data or whatever the data in a confidential way, and we should only allow the users to access, okay, by maybe properly authenticating, verifying the authentication and authorization part, right? So here you have another example. Only bank employees should be able to see your bank details, right? This is how we make sure that by implementing the authentication, authorization checks, right? We give the access to the right people, and when someone is trying to access the resources which are not permitted or access, the request should deny. Right? That's what the confidentiality is. Okay. And what is mean by integrity, right? So I think confidentiality is clear, right? Hmm?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So what is mean by integrity? Right. Let's take an example of okay, you are just sending a letter. Okay, you're just sending a letter and you drop that letter, some okay with some courier services. You will expect the same letter, okay, will be delivered to the other party, right? So you're the sender and they are the recipient, right? But let's say someone joined in this middle. What they have done, they tampered your letter and they replaced something in it, right? What happened if that, like if some third person is joining and making the changes in your letter, the message will be conveyed in a different way, right? You got my point, right? So if this kind of things happens, right, there is no integrity. So integrity means that we have to make sure that the information, okay, uh, remains accurate and unchanged unless altered by authorized persons, right? So, which means there should not be a third party involvement in that communication, and whatever the data that we are sending, it should deliver as it is to them. When someone try to modify it in between, okay, maybe there should be a mechanism to verify it, right? That's what we have something called as a integrity. So integrity makes sure that the information remains accurate, unchanged, unless altered by the authorized person. This means that the information you see or use is reliable and correct. Okay, now. So how can we make sure that how do we implement this? Okay, maybe I'll take one example, right? So I think in our older days, in the same email, there is something called seal, right? They used to seal it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, even today, in when government seizes something, they'll seal it, right?
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
Why? No one should open it or tamper it. If that happens, easily they'll get to know that someone is tampered or opened it. Okay, it's against again their laws and all. That's a different case, right? So here also, when a person, I mean, when an application or system or server is talking from the client to server, of course, a lot of sensitive data, that gets exchanged, right? Let's say if you're submitting your credentials, if you're putting your credit card or debit card information, that goes over the air, right? When I say over the air, let's say the server might be somewhere in US, and you guys are sitting in your home and you're authenticating it, which means your passwords are going from your home, then it goes to your router, then the router routes the traffic to maybe the regional ISP. From there, it takes a lot of different hubs. Then finally, it reaches it. Of course, this process completes in a seconds. But if someone wants to capture your data and if they want to see what is going on, right, there are ways, okay, that they can, maybe spy on you, right? And if they want to maybe tamper it, of course, they can do the tampering if there is no protection, right? So integrity help us to basically identify such type of things, when someone is trying to modify something, right? So we have, of course, the digital signatures nowadays, right? So it'll tell you, right, the integrity of the messages or emails that we are exchanging it, right? And if it is files and all, we use something called hashing. So if you modify something, the hash value will be different. Okay, I think I might be talking a bit technical, but yeah, try to understand it. If you have any questions, yeah, you can definitely ask me, right? So this is what the integrity is, right? And then the availability. So when I say availability, the resources, right? The whatever the resources that we have, it should be available to the people, whenever they wanted to access it, right? Whenever the authorized people wanted to access it. For an example, you have a website, let's say e-commerce website, and I mean, you will have some regular customers who will be coming and okay, doing some shopping, right? So the web server should be accessible to your customers whenever they wanted to buy something, return something, or any activity that they wanted to do it. Correct. So if your website is down, which means there is no availability. Understand? If your website is down, means there is no availability. So we have to ensure that, okay, all the services needs to be accessible to the authorized people whenever they wanted to access it. Otherwise, what happens? Hmm? People will not show interest, right? Always this website seems to be like down. They don't trust.
Our government websites, for example.
I don't want to comment anything, but okay, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
I work I work in the organization, so I have the ideas.
exactly, right? Yeah, it happens. Most of the time it happens, right? But of course, nowadays we have cloud, where you can do auto scaling, load balancing, okay, all of the things properly. Okay, like pay as you service you can go. But if you have some kind of rack servers and all, they have the limited capability of handling the resources. For an example, if you have your own Nginx server, okay, which might be handling, let's say, 10,000 requests per second. Okay, if I know that, okay, you guys are having a rack servers, like attacker, if he is sending a lot of traffic to it, more than what the actual server is capable of. So it will be busy with all my requests only, right? It will be busy with all my malicious request which I'm just sending to servers. I'm just keeping it busy. When a new user comes and try to access that resource, it always says that, hey, server is busy. Right? Until unless if someone comes and look into it, what is the issue, why it is not accessible? Okay, is it a kind of attack that a hacker is doing to consume all the resources? Then they will figure out, and maybe they need to go for a proper solutioning, right? So this is like very key, I can say, right? Even when we are attacking or doing a penetration testing, we actually calculate the impact of a specific issue by understanding these three information security elements: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So our goal, when you work as a security consultant, security person, is to provide this confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the resources and the data. Understood? Hmm?
Yeah.
Okay, it's for all. Is it
Uh,
clear?
yeah,
Or anyone have any questions?
so, Sai, just a quick one. So, I don't know whether it is out of the topic, but when you say encryption, how does that work, and does it still imply to all these things when the hacker tries to log in or steal any kind of a system? So, what is the importance of encryption in this?
Yeah. See, I'll tell you what is the encryption is in a simple way. Uh, like I have my secret. Okay, I have some secret. Uh, See, there are a lot of people in this channel now, right? So if you and me wanted to communicate, even if the other people are there, if I tell that secret, everyone will get to know. Correct. What I'll do, I'll convey that secret into uh, a way that only you and me can able to understand it. Right. That is what the encryption is. Right. I mean to say, let's say you are. Let me give an example. Right. Say you are sitting here and there is a server and you're talking to it. Right. And here is an attacker. Okay. Here is a attacker. So let's say you are sending your password 1 2 3 4 5 6, some secret you are sending it without encryption. This goes as it is from your system to server. Okay, someone who is sitting in between, and if they are monitoring your data packets, they can able to read the secret in a clear text, right? So what we do, we encrypt it in a such a way that okay, only the server can able to understand it, even if someone who is sitting in between try to uh, see what information it is. Okay, but only they can able to see this you know scrambled data, I can say, right, which is just replaced with the secret. Okay, understand?
Sure. So what you are saying is that even though when data is encrypted, are there chances for the hackers to decode it?
Okay, so encryption happens with the keys. If those keys are weak, and if those keys maybe exposes somewhere with some sort of a issue, they might try to read it. Or if you use weaker algorithms, okay, there are ways again. Okay, it's all altogether different topic, but yeah, okay, it's not only you. I mean, attack happens with the one thing, right? Uh, right. It like it depends, right? Um, like if they're using weaker algorithm, if they're using weak keys, and if they're not doing proper key management, right? All of the things comes into the picture. Okay, then and see, if you take care all of this baseline security, it's not so easy someone to decrypt it. Okay, they need keys. Okay, suppose if we go to the browser, of course our communication, if you do with any website, right, it will be encrypted. Suppose let's say I'm opening this Imperva, right? So this website, it says secured, right? It says secure,
Sure.
which means the client is my browser and the server, of course, the Imperva server. They are communicating in an encrypted way. Even if someone is eavesdropping my communication, they can only see the encrypted data. They cannot see the clear text data. Okay, that's the reason it says secure. But similarly, if you go to any other website, let's say I'm just taking you to some website where there is no HTTPS, you can say it says not secure, and your connection to the site is not secure. You should not enter any sensitive information on the site. For an example, passwords, credit card, and blah blah blah. Right? Understand?
Yes.
Okay. I think we'll discuss more technically in the upcoming session, but this is like high level kind of a thing.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, yeah. So Basically, confidentiality ensures that the information is accessible by authorized individual, right? And of course, integrity. The data must be accurate and it should not be altered by the unauthorized parties, right? And availability is something we have to make sure that the resources are accessible when the authorized people try to access it or whenever they try to access it. Clear? So even every organization, right? When every organization is, creating any security policies also, so they create or design the security policies by keeping these things in the mind, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Got it. Always they need to think, right? Okay, there is a data. So what happens if someone is trying to steal, right? Or what happens if someone is trying to modify it? What happens if someone is trying to maybe block the authorized user? Of course, it creates the confidentiality, integrity, and availability issues, right? For that, okay, what solution we will be implementing it over here? Maybe, create a very strong authentication to verify the users, right? Or maybe you use some kind of a, strict validations before you allowing them to modify it, right? Or when it comes to availability, you use some redundancy to ensure the resources are available to the right people, okay, and there won't be any kind of issues related to availability part, right? So this is very, very important. That's the reason I'm taking time and explaining you the things, right? Hope this is clear to you, all of you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Next, yeah, we'll start with very basic fundamental terminologies, right? So first is assets, right? What is asset to an organization? It could be, I mean, anything which has some kind of a value in it. I can call it as an asset. Even the employee is also an asset to an organization, right? Uh, the database, servers, network devices, endpoints, right? Anything which has some kind of a value in it, we basically call it as a asset, right? And what is threat? So, threat is a potential cause of an unwanted incident which may result in a harm to a system or an organization, right? So, there are various types of threats. Okay. Um, for an example, like phishing, insider threats. Um, of course, like when I say threats, basically, uh, okay, maybe let me tell you by giving an example, right? Um, so you're running a server, right? You're running a server, and you know that there is some availability issues in it, right? That is a threat, correct? Or let's say that the data is sent between the client to server without encryption, right? Unencrypted data transmission, right? I mean, these are all various types of threats. It could be again phishing, malware, or natural disaster also, right? A threat is basically a potential cause of an unwanted incident, which may result in harm of a system or an organization, right? So suppose if I'm doing a phishing attack, okay, on the user to steal the credentials, what happened? I mean, I can use those credentials for maybe performing, some kind of a harm, right? Which can leads to some kind of a system damage, right? That is a threat, right? Yeah. And then we have like vulnerabilities. So vulnerability is a weakness, right? It could be anywhere in again, right? Weakness could be anywhere. I mean, of course, in the employees also, right? So possibly, let's say I'm targeting uh, a frustrated employee, right? Because I know that he's frustrated and he might be more easy to trick or convince him to steal some kind of a data, right? So for me, he is a vulnerable. Of course, here I'm talking about the humans, but yeah, it's a weakness, guys. Simple. Vulnerability is a weakness. It could be in the system, software, hardware that can be exploited by the threats, right? So a hacker who is maybe, trying to trying to exploit the weaknesses. When he wanted to exploit, he need weaknesses, right? So weakness is basically what vulnerability. It could be like some kind of unpatched software using a weak passwords, right? These all the weaknesses, we call them as vulnerabilities, correct? And exploit, of course, you see, when you have a vulnerability, there'll be exploit also for it. So when I say exploit, it's a piece of code or a command or a methodology to take the advantage of the vulnerability, right? Identifying the vulnerability is one part, but when you wanted to actually see, right, if you can able to exploit that vulnerability or not, what you need is an exploit code or the steps to exploit it or a methodology, right? Then only you will be able to exploit it, and then you will see till what sort of a sensitive information they can able to access, delete, modify. Right? Again mapping to CIA, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability part. Right? Yeah. So having a vulnerability in the asset is risk that leads a potential loss or a damage when threat exploits it. Right? You understand? So risk is basically a potential loss or a damage when the threat exploits the vulnerability. So here threat is like an attacker, vulnerability is a weakness, okay, in the system, like in the asset. So what is risk? Risk equal to vulnerability into threat, right? Exploiting the vulnerability. Right. So it can leads to, let's say there is a vulnerability in one system. I'm exploiting it. I got the access to it. So now here it is causing a data breach, right? Attacker got all the data access. So that is what the risk is, right? The potential loss or a damage. What hacker can able to do it once they exploit these vulnerabilities. Yeah. And the next attack vector, it's just a path I can say, which is used by the attackers to access or penetrate a system. For an example, I'm attacking through network. So here my attack vector is network. Suppose if I'm attacking through like physical access, a local access, so the attack vector would be local. Okay, if I'm using a phishing or some website. So these are like various attack vectors that they can use it to perform the attacks, right? So when I say attack vector, it's just a path, which is used by the hacker, right, to perform the attack. Understand? And of course, when this kind of malicious things happens, we call them as an incident, right? An event that compromises the integrity, confidentiality, or availability of the information is, we can consider that as a event. Okay. I mean, event, we can consider that as an incident, right? Let's say I'm attacking on your system. Okay, I'm doing some password cracking attack, right? That is an incident, right? Because I am performing that attack to gain the access of your system to to access the confidential information, or maybe I want to modify or delete something, right? So whenever there is any kind of an event that happens, okay, to compromises the CIA, okay, we can consider that as an incident, right? It could be data breach or ransomware, anything. Clear? And of course, we need a solution for this, right? So we call it as a mitigation or a countermeasures I mean, this is like the measure taken to reduce the impact or likelihood of threat exploiting a vulnerability. I mean to say, it's like the solution what you're giving to reduce the risk, right? The solution or the steps that you're giving to reduce the risk, right? So when you reduce the risk, the possibility of loss or damage will come down. Understand? Right? Yeah. So any thing that maybe need me to explain it, or is it good?
Uh, for me, it is good.
Okay. Fine. Yeah. If there is any questions around it, you guys can ask. Okay. I'll just take one real example, right? See, let's say as a security person or some security researcher, okay, let's say identified a weakness in some system. We call that as a vulnerabilities. And there are a lot of products, a lot of vendors, a lot of vulnerabilities, right? So how do we keep track of these vulnerabilities? Okay. Every vulnerability will have something called as a CVE number. Okay. Every vulnerability will have something called as a CVE. So that CVE will look like this. Okay. The CVE will look like this. Common vulnerability exposure. Okay. And yeah, and all those CVs will be saved or tracked in the vulnerability database. Okay. We have vulnerability databases. Yeah, so we have some vulnerability databases which are maintained by governments. And of course, we have some proprietary vulnerability databases also, which are maintained by the different vendors who works with the specific domain, right? So whenever someone identifies any vulnerability, if it is got confirmed, there'll be unique CVE which is assigned to it. And that will be saved in the vulnerability database. Like we have something called NVD, National Vulnerability Database. We have CV details. Okay, CV details. MITRE also we have, right? Like you can just simply Google it. Okay, you will get it. You understand? right? And every vulnerability will also have a, a risk rating. Okay, we call that as a CVSS score. Okay, which is 1 out of 10. Okay, I'll just take you to one example, right? Let's go to uh, NVD or CV details, right? So you can go here, CV details, and here you go, right? See, this many vulnerabilities we have, okay, as of now. And here is the CVSS score related categorization. The highest one has a more impact, right? And the risk associated with it. So, of course, maybe you take anything, right? Let's say you can also search by date. Uh, I mean, you can also see if that exploit is available for that vulnerability as in our CVSS score, EPSS score, okay, exploit prediction scoring system. You can also search with the vendor, product, version, and all of these things. Let's say I'm going with vendor, okay. So you have all the vendors over here, right? Let's say maybe, okay, let me search with Cisco because as you know, they are like well-known vendors in the networking part, right? See year on year, how many vulnerabilities are identified and the categorization, okay? Buffer overflow, memory corruption, SQL injection, these are all like various vulnerabilities. Okay, and then we have year on year. Suppose let's say I'm going to 2025. So here is the CV for this specific vulnerability. What is this? This is related to Erlangen OTP is a set of libraries of a Erlangen programming language prior to a version of OTP 27.3.2, okay, 3.3 and 26.2.5.11 and all these versions. A SS server may allow an attacker to perform the unauthenticated remote code execution by exploiting this SS. So basically, if you take this CV, it's a unique, right? How can we confirm that? If you go and search it in the other tab, you will only able to see the results, which are related to that OTP uh, service, right? Sierlagan, right? Same. You understand? So it's a unique. And every vulnerability will also have what? A CVSS score. It's a 10, which means like I can say it's a critical kind of a thing. Right? If you identify such type of a critical issues, it's a noun issue. Okay. Let's say if you're also using this kind of this service in your organization, okay, there is a possibility that someone can maybe exploit this issue because it's a noun. I mean, the exploit is also available in the internet. Okay, we know the steps to exploit it. And if you see the EPSS score, right, is exploit prediction scoring system, it's 53. I mean, it's actively being exploited, right? And if you see the CVSS score, it's a 10 out of 10, right? And if you maybe click on this CV, you will have more detailed information when this vulnerability is published, updated, what is the source, right? And then you have all the information from the vendor. And here is the exploit is available. Okay. The exploit is also available over here. And this is what the CVSS score what I was talking, right? So you can, this is something, if you look in this last part, right? C high, IH, right? This is like confidentiality high, integrity high, availability high. I mean, if someone exploit this vulnerability, they can able to read all the sensitive information in the server. They can able to modify and they can able to delete it. That's the reason it is out of 10 out of 10. Okay. So yeah, this is the relation I can say. Vulnerability and vulnerability database and CVSS score and EPSS score. And not every vulnerability will have the exploit, guys, right? Only if it is disclosed to the public, yeah, right? uh, we can find it. If it is not disclosed to the public, yeah, we cannot. And that's where the EPSS score will be less. Say these are all like 9.9, 10, but they don't have the exploit code available in the internet, right? Yeah. Clear? What is mean by CV and CVSS score? Hmm? So this is how it look like when I say CVSS score. CVSS score. We can also calculate the CVSS score by going into the first.org. I mean, that is, of course, you have a time, okay? But if you would like to understand the CVSS score, here it is, right? If something is between the 9 to 10, it's critical, and 7 to 8.9 high, 4 to 6.9 medium, and 0.1 to 3.9 is low. So based upon this, you know, based upon this CVSS score only, we can prioritize the vulnerability. Let's say you have 1,000 vulnerabilities. Which one you will take it as a first priority to fix it, right? The one which has more CVSS score, right? So that the risk will be coming down. Understand? Even if you identify some kind of a vulnerability, how do I calculate my own CVSS score? Right? I mean, if you identify a vulnerability and exploit it, you knows the uh, you knows how you have exploited until like what sort of access that you were able to gain it, how difficult it is and all, right? Then you can provide all these details over here and you will be able to generate your own CVSS score. Of course, you're learning all of these calculations and all in the actual sessions, right? Let's say uh, attack vector. Just now we have learned about this term, the path which is used by which is used to perform the attack, right? Let's say it's something which can be exploited through network. You have a clear description also while you're choosing it, okay? And attack complexity. Some attacks can be exploited easily and some not, right? Suppose the one which has the exploit available outside and the steps also available outside. So attack complexity is less, right? Low. And do we need privileges to attack or run this exploitation? Sometimes users may require the low level privileges or maybe high level privileges to identify this. So depending on that, you can choose it. Let's say privileges is not required remotely, we can able to do it. None. And sometimes while you're exploiting it, like especially related to phishing and all, or cross-site scripting kind of a thing, they need to click on some links and all. So here you can define that, okay, whether user interaction is required or not. So if the user interaction is required, then you can give yes or else no. And scope, right? So after exploiting this vulnerability, right, will you be able to move to the other components, right? According to that, you can choose it. And depending on this is the impact matrix, guys, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So depending on the kind of or level of access that you have, the privileges what you have, you can give this. Let's say you're able to read all the sensitive information, modify, delete. Then here is a 9.8 CVSS score, right? This is what the formula which is there for every vulnerability when you look into it. Right? If you go to any CV, so you will see calculation, right? So this calculation is something which is here with, by giving all this, see, I mean, details only, we got this. Okay, no worries. If it is, I mean, if you got it, that's fine. Or else we have something called vulnerability assessment module, where I'll be covering this in a detailed way. Okay. Yeah. So this is what for today. Only what is information security and what is CIA and importance of the CIA, and some basic terminologies, and about the, uh, of course, the vulnerability databases, CV, CVSS code, and EPSS code, and all of this, right? Uh, Hope it is clear to you. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll take it up.
It's clear for me, fine.
Hmm? How is that?
No, I just said it's clear for me.
Okay. Okay. See, our first priority is to identify and tell them the known vulnerabilities to them, so that they'll be fixing it and reducing the impact when you especially work in the vulnerability assessment part. When you say pen testing, of course, you will also be finding your own vulnerabilities on different applications and all, right? So yeah, when you find it, there might not, I mean, it's like the common vulnerabilities only that you will be finding it yourself manually. Like for an example, cross-site scripting, SQL injection. These are like already the pretty standard vulnerabilities that you just need to learn it and go and see if those vulnerabilities are still exist in the application or not. So always it happens with tools and also manual techniques. So depending on, uh, I can say it is completely depending on the uh, area that we works, right, network or application. Uh, you know, the results will be different. Suppose if I am talking about the network, in network, of course, most of the vulnerability assessment and all happens with the automated tools, like 90%, I can say, right? More than 90%. But when it comes to application, only 55 or 50, 60% of the coverage which the tools can do it, because they don't understand the real business logic. So there we need to test it manually, right? Yeah.
So to identify the business logic vulnerabilities, we'll have to manually test it. There's no automation for that.
Yeah. You have to test and execute the test cases according to your own knowledge. The tools will not understand it. Okay, for an example, uh,
Mhm.
like you're developing an application with two different user roles. Okay,
Mhm.
let's say admin and a normal user, right?
Mhm.
So if you would like to check, if a normal user can able to access the sensitive information of an admin, or if you can able to perform any kind of a task which are restricted, okay, for him. The tools will not knowing that how to test it, and there is no maturity for this tool. So 100% manually you have to test it, and that's where the demand is, right? Basically for pen tester.
Okay, correct. Fine.
Yeah.
Uh, so is that all?
Yeah, that's all. I'm just waiting. If you have any questions, I'll take it, or else we can close this for today, and we'll continue tomorrow. So right now I'm not giving any assignments, right? Of course, like it's too early. Yeah, there are a few enrollments which are happened. We are creating a WhatsApp group, and we are also creating a Google Classroom, where you will have the assignments and all the resources, which we'll be sharing. right? So yeah,
Okay then.
yeah. Okay, chalo. Bye.